The value in money over time and investing over time is how long you can keep it going for. I did some work for a family several years ago, and they were worth $8 billion. And when they reached out to me, I said, well, let me do some research on this family. Nothing. Go online, search their name, every database, nothing. Yes, we have more money than other people, but we're not better than them. Some of those people who have much less money than us are better than us. The long-term family wealth made their money in products and services that don't change tremendously over time. I saved and invested when I was 20 years old. Because I invested in the stock market, today it's worth $300 or $400. Musk was talking about it. He gave a podcast a couple of years ago, and he said, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, you might think you want to be me, the richest man in the world, but he said, it's a mess, it's a storm up here. And but that's why they're successful, is because they probably can't sleep at night because they're so tormented with the problems they're trying to solve. I admire that. I don't envy it. I did some work for a family several years ago, and they were worth $8 billion. I came out to do some consulting for the grandkids, talk about money kind of thing. And when they reached out to me, I said, well, let me do some research on this family. Nothing. Go online, search their name, every database, nothing. They had a unique name too, like the name that you would be able to find. Their name was not Joe Smith. I couldn't find it. Nothing. And that was very intentional. They went out of their way to make sure that no, they're not on any list. They donate their money anonymously, kind of thing, because I think, and they would not describe it this explicitly, but they wanted to do the opposite of the Vanderbilts. The Vanderbilts were the purpose of the family is to be rich. And this family was the purpose. Yes, we are rich and we're grateful for that, but that is secondary to we want to be a good family who is otherwise normal. And they didn't live a normal life. They lived like very wealthy people, but they were some of the most down-to-earth, seemingly ordinary people when you talk to them. That I've met. So I think the families that use their money as a tool to live a better life for themselves and to donate and give others versus the wealthy families that use it as a yardstick of status. And they associate their net worth with their self-worth. And because their net worth is high, they assume they're better than everybody else. I think that's really what it gets down to. The more that you can be a wealthy person or have children as a wealthy person, and you can say, yes, we have more money than other people, but we're not better than them. We're not better. And in fact, some of those people who have much less money than us are better than us. They're more moral. They're better. They have better family lives and whatnot. That's pretty important. Yeah. I recently just on a plane the other day, watched a documentary on Netflix on the Murdoch family. And that's another one of have you seen the show Succession? That's another one where you look at it. Those children were born multi-billionaires. Yeah. And you watch a documentary and you're like, I would never want that. I would much rather have parents who were school teachers, firefighters. That would be a better life. It tends to be true that the long-term family wealth made their money in products and services that don't change tremendously over time. There's some counterexamples to that I can think of. But by and large, the Rockefellers still have money today because oil is as valuable today as it was 130 years ago. But there were plenty of families 130 years ago who were making money in radios, let's say, that didn't make it anymore. And so I think if there's any takeaway from that in your personal life, like forget becoming one of the richest families in the world, but the value in money over time and investing over time is how long you can keep it going for. It's not, can you make an incredible product that's going to explode over the next 2 or 3 years? There can be value in that. But I think a lot of the enduring family wealth comes from families who are like, look, we make a product that was valuable 100 years ago and it's valuable today. So Procter & Gamble, they make toothpaste and toilet paper and, the diapers, things that are boring, don't attract a lot of attention and whatnot. But that has a higher odds of creating more wealth over the next 100 years than any AI company has today. I mean, that's a provocative statement, right? Procter & Gamble has a higher chance of making more money over the next 100 years than OpenAI. So my wife and I were talking to them yesterday, and we were talking about AI. And my wife turns to these people who are carpenters and plumbers, and she says, "You guys are fine. You got all the job security in the world. It's everybody else who has to worry." I think it's less about the disruption and more about people are going to want their kitchens remodeled 100 years from now in the same way that they were 100 years ago. Now, maybe there's going to be robots that do it for us, a new technology that helps with it, but the product in itself is not going to go away. I don't know if I would phrase it as generally more well-behaved, but there are definitely regions and countries around the world that have very different financial behavior. And I think a lot of it has to do with what those cultures have experienced in the previous 100 years. So let me give you examples of this.
Got it.
The German stock market since the 1950s has done very, very well, incredibly well. In some periods, better than the United States. But if you go to Germany and you talk to Germans about, hey, do you invest in the stock market? You guys all rich? You invest? No. What? Stock market? No, we don't invest in the stock market. It's just kind of out of sight, out of mind. And it's similar if you go to Australia, South Africa, Canada. These places, their stock market performance has been very good over a long period of times. And by and large, they don't want to invest in it. One of the reasons for someone like Germany is you have to remember at the end of World War II, Germany was in rubble. Everything was destroyed. And to the extent that the people survived in that, the message that they had from that was focus on downside protection. Don't shoot for the stars and try to get as wealthy as you can. Just hold on to what you got. And so what became popular as investments was real estate, gold, things that have more enduring value. And as a whole society across Europe, really what the government started focusing on was downside protection. Universal health insurance, which we don't have in America. Strong government pension plans, which we, by and large, don't have in America. And so culturally, because they had a very different experience, the United States did not face physical destruction in World War II. Lost a lot of lives, but not physical destruction. I think at the end of the war, at a cultural level, Americans said, we want uncapped upside. And Europeans and Japanese said, we want protected downside. And so I think you get a lot of those. What's important about that is the Americans and the Europeans, I think that they are thinking independently. That Americans say, like, we want unlimited upside potential because that's what's best. And the Europeans say, no, you want downside protection because that's what's best. They're actually just mimicking the cultures that have been ingrained in their society by their ancestors. And so that sticks around. Now, how long that can stick around for is something else. You know, will Europeans keep thinking that as we get 100 years past World War II, 200 years past World War II? I don't know how long it can stick around for. But I think what we assume is independent thinking is actually just a cultural echo. And I think you see that at the individual family level as well, that what you've experienced in life, what your parents, how your parents lived, how you were brought up as a child. I wrote in The Art of Spending Money, I found this incredible headline. I thought it was incredible. From 1929, the peak of the roaring 20s just before the Great Depression, when there was a lot of money, a lot of spending, a lot of debt. And the headline was, the more you are snubbed while poor, the more you enjoy displaying being rich. So if you grew up poor and people made fun of you, they bullied you, that's your insecurity. Once you get some money, when you're an adult, you're like, I'm going to show them. I'm going to show that bully who made fun of me when I was 7 years old. I'm going to make fun of him by buying a big house and a fast car and a flashy watch. And that's why you're doing it. I think that's a big thing, that a lot of our behaviors, mine too, are just echoes from things that happened years, decades, sometimes generations ago. I think that the majority of economic and political and social debates would disappear if you could actually see through the eyes of your opponent who you're debating with. If you could actually be in their shoes and know what they believe, all these things would disappear. Jason Zweig of the Wall Street Journal wrote this many years ago. I have it in my notes. He said, if I ask you in a questionnaire whether you are afraid of snakes, you might say no. If I throw a live snake in your lap and then ask you if you're afraid of snakes, you'll probably say yes and never talk to me again. And so it's just this idea that the gap between believing something as an outsider versus someone experiencing real uncertainty and risk and fear in the moment can be a mile wide. And you can apply this to really big things as well. There's a theory that we have big events like world wars every 60 to 80 years because that's how long it takes for the previous generation to experience it and said never again to die off. And then you have a new generation who's never experienced that kind of trauma who says maybe we should give it another shot. And you have these big events that keep coming along like that. And so look, I think if you go out of your way to try to see the world through other people's eyes, you become less cynical about other people's bad decisions and other people's irrationality. And I think you become a little bit more humble about your own beliefs and more accepting that I believe X, Y, and Z because I was born in this country, in this generation to these parents and through nothing but sheer dumb luck have experienced these certain events in my life that led me to believe this is how the world works, and you do the same. And so I think a good mental exercise for everybody, and this goes beyond politics because investing in economics and finance has a very strong political element to it. It's almost unavoidable. Asking yourself these questions. Which of my current views would I disagree with if I were born in a different country or a different generation? That's a tough one. That's a big one. A common complaint I got about my first book, The Psychology of Money, was that it was only relevant to a white American male. And my response to that would be like, yeah, guilty as charged. Of course, I'm going to see the world through my life. I can try to be empathetic, but no amount of empathy can actually recreate genuine uncertainty and genuine fear in the moment. What have I not experienced firsthand that leaves me naive to how something works? You can apply that to so many different things. Next, what is a problem that I think only applies to other countries or industries or careers that will eventually impact me? Of course, it was not that long ago, like 2 years ago, that some of the best career advice we could give young people was learn to code. And who are seemingly the first job to be completely upended by AI? It's coders. And that happened in 24 months. And I think to some extent, it's impossible to actually answer those questions. Maybe that's the point. You have to experience it before you can actually understand it. And so the biggest takeaway to me is when you try to be more empathetic and outside of the own little bubble that we all live in, you become less cynical about other people's beliefs and more humble about your own. It is extremely hard for anyone to go backwards in lifestyle. If you give up your high-paying job and you have to ratchet back your lifestyle, maybe you don't, but let's say you do, that's very difficult, and it's easy to underestimate how difficult it's going to be. To give an example, if you go from a Honda to a BMW, feels pretty cool. Feels okay. If you go from a BMW and you're forced to go back to the Honda, it can be devastating. It can be crushing because you realized how much of your lifestyle, whether it was the home you lived in, the car you drive, the vacations that you took, the restaurants that you ate in, became ingrained in your identity. That was who you were. And if you are forced to give it up, it can be a very hard thing to deal with. But let me say this about demotivating jobs as well. Of course, there are soul-sucking jobs that are miserable, that people should not put up with, should not tolerate and go find something else to do. There is another side of this. There's a great quote from Jeff Bezos where he says, if you can enjoy half of your job, that's really good. If you enjoy it 50% of the time, and the other half of the time you hate your job, or your job is boring and menial, that's a good balance. No job is fun 100% of the time. There's a really good interview recently on David Senra's podcast with Rick Rubin, the famous music producer, and one of the most famous men in music in all of history. And he talks about how many mornings he wakes up and looks at his calendar and says, oh, I have to go to the studio today. I hate going to the studio. I would much rather just sit around and take a nap and read a book. Most jobs have elements that are not fun, and that's okay. We've probably done a lot of brain damage to young people with this idea that work should be perfectly fulfilling and match your view of the world and your values and whatnot. A lot of times work is just work. And if you tell yourself that the bad parts of your job you should not tolerate, you should go find something in where you always enjoy 100% of what you're doing, that I think is fiction. That I think is a fairy tale that just doesn't exist very often in the world. The last thing I would say is related to that last point. There is huge dignity and honor in working hard to support your family, in doing things that are not always fun and enjoyable, but you're doing it for the right cause, which is working hard to support your family. Now, maybe, Tim, you could do that with a career in racket sports. I don't know, or doing something else, finding a better job with a better boss. That might be the case. But I think we overlook that aspect too often. And maybe it's because the world has become so comfortable and wealthy that we have less tolerance for hard jobs, at least in some parts of the world, that I think reminding yourself that working hard to support your family is one of the most honorable things that you can do.